You also have metabolic disruption. So there's insufficient anti-inflammatory compounds to actually prevent the oxidation of cholesterol. So you have kind of various things converging to make this one disease process occur. And really, so if you understand all these things leading to heart disease, you will be able to target all of these areas. So you can target inflammation with turmeric, you can target cholesterol, for instance, with something like, dietary modification, maybe something like hibiscus tea or soy, eating soy or nuts and seeds, etc. And then, your support, as well as other medicinal herbs specifically, that can lower blood pressure, improve the vascular integrity. So all these areas can be addressed, right, if you're specific with your supplement support plan. And then you're able to ensure the appropriate dosage. Some supplements you kind of go up on with time, some you reduce, and some of them should be taken with other things to help absorption, etc. And then you're also able to monitor the response. So we don't just give a supplement or make some dietary changes and say like, see you later. But we have to monitor what happens and is there a benefit? If not, then we have to make some changes if it's not ideal or not optimal. We can always fine tune it. Okay, so that's the end of that. Any questions about supplements? Okay, we're going to talk about exercise now, since we're in a Pilates studio.
Michael, you haven't mentioned spinach.
What about spinach?
Like, my son yesterday, he's like, how come Michael didn't mention spinach? It's the superfood. That's what they tell us in school. So maybe it's not specifically targeted.
No, I mean, spinach is a great food to eat. It just, it's not like, it doesn't have any, or maybe I just didn't run across any specific studies on spinach. Mm-hmm. But, it's definitely part of your 9 a day,
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a green leafy vegetable, very healthy.
He was partially listening yesterday, so he actually called me out.
I see. Yeah, spinach is great.
Okay.
Anyway, so who knows what in a biological sense what stress is? The definition is up there basically. So for the body, anything that requires energy to cope with is considered stress. And it doesn't matter if it comes from physical labor or emotional or psychological, it's all the same to the body. And so anything that requires the body to expend energy to bring itself back into balance is considered stress. And so the scientific term for balance in the body is homeostasis. Okay, so it means optimal physiological functioning. So, if you think about it, all of life is a balancing act. You can imagine yourself as a blade of grass swaying in the wind, right? And in this sense, you're the blade of grass, and the wind is stress, right? It's pulling you in every direction. You're struggling to maintain yourself upright. So your ability to bend in the wind without breaking is analogous to your capacity to cope with the stress. So like I said before, the stress can come in many forms, but the body sees it as the same thing. And so regardless of the type or source of the stress, your reaction to it will actually influence how much energy is required to maintain balance. We know that the right dose and duration of stress, so the right amount is necessary, and also the right reaction to maintain a healthy immune function. So stress is actually a necessary part of health. We wouldn't be healthy without stress, but at the same time, we don't want more than we can handle, right? So we need the right amount, the right duration, and the right reaction to it. So too much or too little can actually impair immune function. And then we have these compounds called adaptogens. So they're found in medicinal plants, and they're able to enhance one's resilience to stress. So if you think about that analogy in the blade of grass, right? They would be something you could take from a plant that would actually make that blade of grass more flexible and more resilient. So even though it can bend, pretty far with the wind, it would be able to always get back up. And we have like herbs like amla berries or Indian gooseberries and other medicinal herbs that are in this category of adaptogens. This first one is actually one of the most important medicines in the Ayurvedic medical system, so it has a whole bunch of health benefits. I recommend all of you get some. And so, you know, if you want to imagine it like this, like, so for instance, there was a tribe in the Pacific Islands of hunters. So often they would go on hunts, and they would have to run after their prey, sometimes all day, without any food breaks, you know, without any rest. And the way they were able to keep this up was actually by use of an adaptogenic berry. So they ate these tiny little red berries called schisandra berries, and by doing this, they were able to keep up their energy and tirelessly pursue their prey. So that's how potent, really, these plants can be. So I kind of talked about this, that our adaptogens are these molecules in these medicinal plants that can give us greater resilience and help us to bend in the wind without breaking and maintain our balance. So this is a graph showing how our immune function is affected by stress, right? So when we have a little bit of stress, or the right amount, let's say through exercise, then we get a boost in our immune function. But as the stress becomes more chronic, right, it declines after a while. So the body will, you know, kind of give up. But then what happens if we enhance our ability to cope with stress by taking one of these medicinal plants like amla, is that we're able to put up with greater stress before our body gives up, right? So the immune function stays elevated, and our risk of becoming sick is much lower. It's not to say that adaptogens are like immune tonics, but more to say that they prevent the immune function from declining due to excessive stress. So, yes. Sir.
So if you say stress is your body sees stress as the same if you're exercising versus psychological, why does your body feel maybe different or can handle like the stress of exercise? Like it doesn't feel like it's so stressed out, but maybe some other situation is stressing you out, whether it's work or just stuff. Why does your body not see it differently? Or
Yeah, it's because
cope with it better?
Yeah, so the form of stress is very important. It does, because the form of stress is very important. And so exercise is something you initiate and you control, right? So you have all the control over that, over exactly how much you exercise, right? How long. So the ability to fine tune that stress makes it quite different from other forms. And your ability, so your body, you know, you do feel, basically, I mentioned your reaction is important, right? So,
you're feeling good after
exactly.
exercise.
So since you're in control of it, you know, basically your reaction is always quite positive, that, you know, you're kind of, yeah. But other forms of stress, you know, like if you're in a car accident, that you feel sometimes you lose control, right? So that can be quite a drain in our immune system as well. Yeah, so stress basically, so exercise is a form of stress required by the body for general health. And you can think of it as exerting, since we're talking, a controlled amount of stress on the body, right? So you have the gears and the controls, and you're able to determine exactly how much you want, and how much you can actually cope with. So we know that too little or too much will impair immune function, just like that graph showed, but the right amount can actually improve immune function and general health. So for most of us, we really don't need to worry about too much exercise, right? It's like 99.999% of us. Only really athletes and extreme endurance athletes and people who exercise a whole lot really need to worry about this. So if we think about it on a global scale, or even in the US, inactivity is the 5th leading cause of death in the US, and poor diet, by the way, is number 1. And it's also the 6th leading cause of disability. So this is a graph showing the risk factor for mortality. and you have dietary risk as number 1, physical activity number 5. This is in the US. And for disability, again, you have dietary risk number 1, and then physical activity quite high as well. And on a worldwide, it's also in the top 10 as far as physical activity. So as you already know, though, exercise has a wide range of health benefits, improves mental function, sleep quality, immune function, cancer prevention. So if Americans were to exercise enough to reduce our body mass index by just 1%, and for those of you who don't know, body mass index is just a measure it's a ratio of your height to your weight. So for how tall you are, it's an estimation of how much you should weigh, right? And most of us are way over what we should be. So if this were to drop by 1%, you could actually prevent hundreds of cases of cancer, hundreds of thousands, and millions of cases of heart disease and stroke and diabetes. And this is again showing the very same thing, that just a 1% reduction in weight would prevent all this disease burden. So there was a breakthrough discovery in exercise physiology. Any guesses? Each session of physical activity leads to incremental improvement in immune function, right? That's what we're talking about, and reduced illness rates. It leads to fewer respiratory infections, fewer sick days, and it works regardless of age, unlike things like vaccines. So for instance, kids can increase immune cells after only 6 minutes of physical activity. And even seniors in their 70s, they can reduce their odds of catching a respiratory infection by half only by walking 30 minutes a day. If they run, it drops even further by 5-fold. So yeah, like I said before, the right amount of exercise improves immune function, but extreme over-exercising can have the opposite effect. And the vast majority of people don't need to worry about extreme over-exercising. So this is a graph of the effect of exercise on your risk of catching a cold or a respiratory infection. And so we have, with some activity, moderate activity, your risk declines quite a bit, but with really heavy strenuous exercises, it climbs back up. So how much exercise is enough? What do you guys think? How many minutes, how many hours, how many days a week?
An hour a day?
An hour a day, that's a good guess. Any other guesses?
30 to an hour.
30 minutes to an hour, okay.
When you talk about exercise, you talk about like
How much did you?
Yeah,
Okay.
like going and working out for an hour, and that's a session, and the rest of the 23 hours a day you're sitting on the couch, or should you, does walking count?
Yeah, everything counts. Like walking counts, any kind of movement
Yeah.
counts. So basically, the guidelines for exercise, just like with nutrition, they're not based on the evidence. Rather than, they're based on what most Americans will find that they can do, right? What's tolerable, what's acceptable. So all these authoritative bodies, recently they lowered, before it used to be that they recommended half an hour a day, right? Now, they're like, oh, nobody can do that in the US, not even half an hour. So we're gonna reduce it to 20 minutes a day. So they're basically, instead of us catching up to the science, the health authorities are lowering the bar to catch up to us, which is kind of backwards. Yeah. If you think about it, compared to just being sedentary, 20 minutes a day even of just moderate activity can actually drop mortality by 7%. And this could be like walking, gardening, housework or yard work, anything. And if you increase it to 40 minutes a day, you can drop mortality by twice as much, 14%. 60 minutes a day, it drops to 24%. Okay. And so we have a recent study that found that 90 minutes was even better than an hour. What about over 90 minutes? What do you guys think? Well, unfortunately, there's so few people who exercise over 90 minutes a day that we really don't know. We don't have these studies. We don't have enough people that do that.
Maybe they're farmers.
What's that?
Maybe they're farmers or
Yeah, we should do a farming study. Any questions about exercise?
But that 60 minutes are, is that accumulated throughout like the day, or
Yeah.
is it like in one session?
No, it's accumulated throughout the day, so
So
everything
you
counts.
can do like 30
Yeah.
minutes maybe in the
Sure,
morning,
yeah.
30 minutes at
In fact, it's better that way. It's better that you continue to exercise rather than just do an hour and then sit on a chair for the
Right.
rest of the. Because we know that even sitting for 2 hours without getting up actually impairs artery function already.
Right. Just like
So every hour you guys should be getting up for a few minutes at least if you're sitting. Okay. Well, if you think about it, conventional sports medicine really doesn't have much to offer for athletes that tend to exert themselves and push themselves too hard. And so normally after cycling vigorously for 2 hours, you can experience already a drop in your immune cells. But there was a study that showed that consuming only less than a teaspoonful per day of nutritional yeast already was able to heighten and restore these immune cells to their normal activity, and even higher levels than before they started exercising. So, what do you think? Does this translate into reduced days of being sick?
It should.
Yeah, recent study. There was a recent study in marathon runners. They found that they could actually cut their rates of infection after a race in half just by eating the equivalent of about a teaspoonful a day of nutritional yeast. Okay, so this is like kind of what you add to bread to make it rise. It's the same thing. It's nutritional yeast, which is the same thing as baker's or brewer's yeast, and it was found to have this immune effect. And those taking the yeast even felt better as well. They reported feeling more vigorous, less tense, less fatigued. So studies in the general population also show that those taking about a teaspoonful a day can cut their rates of infection by about 25%. And even if they did get sick, they had fewer symptoms and improved mood. Any side effects? Well, unlike the antibiotics and antimicrobial drugs which kill off bacteria directly, the yeast work like many of the other foods we talked about by actually upregulating our own immune defense system and our own immune cells. So they don't have any of the adverse drug effects. And like in that study, for instance, there were 2 people who reported stomach aches, but those were in the placebo group, right? So it's not the yeast. But it should be noted, just in rare cases, those with autoimmune diseases, gout, uric acid, kidney stones, they should either avoid or restrict their intake. Any questions about nutritional yeast? Okay. So what about sleep?
It's important.
Yeah, it's important. What is the importance of sleep? Do you guys know? What does sleep do?
It balances your hormones.
Yeah, so it's necessary for hormone metabolism. Any other ideas? No? Okay, so it's actually important to maintain normal physiology in general and prevent disease. So it's important for memory retention, formation, acquisition. It's important for if you're stressed out, it basically clears all that stuff out, all the stress hormones out of your body, like you mentioned. So there's a huge. The brain is actually more active when we're asleep than when we're awake. Okay, and different areas are active. So it's a very active process. Some people think that you're just not doing anything and you're brain dead. That's not true at all. It's actually quite the opposite. Our brain lights up in ways that would be very rare or impossible during the waking hours. And there's all sorts of maintenance and repair functions occurring. So we need adequate sleep duration quality for proper immune system maintenance. And we know that deficiency in sleep leads to a number of problems, and among them are impairment to our immune cells. So adults need typically 7 to 8.5 hours per day. And the most restorative type of sleep occurs